For our summer services, our UUCA worship team wanted to expand the number of voices speaking from the pulpit. And so several weeks back, I reached out to some folks to see if they'd want to participate. I said, if your house were to catch on fire, what would you grab on your way out the door? What would you grab? We seek to celebrate some of these things and shine a light on what it means to be human. Do you have any stories about your treasures that you would like to share? Some days later, I received this reply from Nancy. She said, my attitude toward treasures is tainted a bit by my experience over 5 months of cleaning out the home of a friend who was a full-blown hoarder. When everything is a treasure, and then she wrote ... and there's a whole lot in that ... And then she said, I also take my grandchildren on treasure walks, where we stop and notice treasures around us, acorns, blue skies, funny twigs, bugs, etc. Well, we just heard the treasure walk story, which was amazing. But what about that one about hoarding? I was not expecting an angle like this on the treasures of our lives theme. Wasn't expecting it to come up. It really surprised me. But that is diversity for you. If you give time to it, if you give the gift of time to it, time to notice and wonder, it opens things up. The email conversation with Nancy and the unexpected turn it took was itself an unsuspecting treasure. Now, she went on to say that her hoarder friend, and this is the longtime friend and singing partner who recently passed away, and our condolences to you, Nancy. She had only a 12-inch pathway leading from the door to the bathroom with a short jag to the recliner. It had been sobering for sure, says Nancy, and difficult because my friend knew I was doing it and knew it was necessary, but still I had to make decisions over and over again about what was a treasure that she should keep and which ones must go. As she said, only she knew what something meant, how much it meant to her, or what her plans were for it. It was her stuff, her identity, her security. And while she repeatedly said she trusted me and was grateful, it was very difficult for her. Nancy then said she hadn't slept in her bed for 15 years because the room was so full, she just couldn't get to it. Reading all of this for me was electricity. It jolted out of me one of my own memories of my mother and her obsessive-compulsive behaviors, of how years ago when I was growing up, she would wrap all kinds of things, whether they were important or not. She'd wrap them up in paper or plastic, tape them up, put them at the foot of our beds, bigger things at the base and then progressively smaller things on top. And so they ended up looking like pyramids. And in time, those pyramids, they got so big that there wasn't enough room on our beds for both her bizarre creations and her children. So we children had to go looking for other places to sleep. Now, I shared a little of the story with Nancy, and she replied, to live through that as a child is something I cannot imagine. The whole subject of treasures is fascinating. As I sit here ruminating, it is clear to me that treasures are not necessarily carefree. Some of the souvenirs and treasures can certainly be mementos of difficult times we survived. A steering wheel from a crashed car, an orthotic device. And that is when the unsuspecting treasure story I want to share right now, that is when it came to me. And we'll see the slide now. That is a name tag of mine from Okay, guys, shut up. Come on. Let me tell my story. Sorry. That's a name tag of mine from 32 years ago when I worked at Pizza Hut. Can you lower the lights a little bit? Just really want people to see that thing. Lower the lights, lower the lights. Can you see it? It's good. Is it impressed upon your brain? Okay, you can raise the lights now. Thank you. 32 years ago, I worked there. I was there because I had taken a leave of absence from Texas A&M University during my sophomore year. And I'm going to begin at the beginning. I emerged from high school as student council president in the academic top 10 of my graduating class, as founding nerd or geek or both of a group called the IQ Booster Club. Who is laughing so loud over here? I was also a medical doctor's son. It was the only career path I had known all my life, and it was simply unimaginable to me that I could do anything else, even though in another compartment of my brain I wondered about what it would be like to be a minister. But this is what we do. We compartmentalize. We experience a balkanization of the brain. The different parts don't talk to each other. So I entered college with the purpose of going to medical school, and why not? The sky was the limit. Blithely and without any concern in the world, I signed up for the harder science classes, the honors classes, honors chemistry, honors calculus. I was going to start things off with a bang. Well, it turned out to be all bust. My head could not follow the professors. My head could not follow the numbers and the experimental protocols. Other students seemed to be understanding just fine, but I was not understanding anything. And this is where the offended perfectionism of my inner student council, student body president, top 10 achiever, IQ Booster Club founder, and doctor's son made my life a living hell. The one comfort in this time was my discovery of a used bookstore in town to which I would go frequently just to keep moving, just like the shark, just to keep moving, even as I felt the heavy, paralyzing feelings of shame and worthlessness intensifying. And it's me, of course, so I would go to the sections on philosophy and psychology and religion and art and poetry and paranormal phenomenon. And while on the one hand this was amazing, on the other it was crashing the religious worldview that I had come to college with. I came into college as a Church of Christ fundamentalist. You were all going to hell. But the Southern Baptists were going to hell too, so I worshiped at Texas A&M Church of Christ. All my friends were from the huge college group Aggies for Christ. But that did not stop my sense of God changing. The liberal education I was getting from books just gave strength to the suspicions and feelings that I've been having for years, but could not articulate well. I couldn't connect the dots. But the dots were connecting now. And that is why at the start of my sophomore year, I stopped going to church. I stopped responding to phone calls and letters from friends asking me about what was happening, what was going on. They would have excommunicated me anyhow. My entire community of friends was gone. I also changed my major to psychology. And perhaps that might have been a better fit, but even in psychology, I encountered some very technical stuff, namely statistics. Statistics! And once again, my brain flailed about like someone who doesn't know how to swim. Plus, I ended up developing this very strange grudge against my professor, whose name happened to be one Dr. Shine. He was a big man, he had small hands. Get your heads out of the gutter, people. Big man, small hands, high-pitched voice. Acted like anybody who couldn't get statistics was a complete idiot. And he would write on the chalkboard and then pull out a handkerchief and obsessively wipe and 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 wipe, and I could go on, his hands. And every time he would tell us how he was allergic to chalk dust. And I would think, well, here's a guy who needs some therapy. I refused to go to statistics class. Exam days came and went. The student council president in me, the top 10 achiever, the IQ Booster Club founder, the doctor's son, these voices of perfectionism, they were screaming in their panic. But another part of me had had enough. And that is the part I obeyed. And this is the first time I ever failed a class. And here, too, is yet another instance of how everything seemed to be falling apart. My entire life, I had labored under the perfectionism that said to me, if you fail, the worst thing imaginable is going to happen to you. But look here, I did fail. And I did not die. And dire things did not happen to me. The F on my report card was not a bullet to my brain. It was simply a mark on a piece of paper. And I still got up every morning. It is no small thing when long and deeply held dreams fall apart. Dream of being a doctor, the dream of one way, one truth, one life, spirituality, and all its comforting certitude. The dream of a life that is pure and perfect, and there are no messy mistakes that others might point their fingers at and say, shame on you. Whether the dreams are helpful or not, it is no small thing when they fall away. I had to do something to stop the free fall. There was only one thing to do, really. Take a leave of absence, regain my bearings, perhaps find a place to work and just reestablish simple rhythms in my life that had nothing to do with school or religion or being the best. Just surrender to the completely unexpected place that life was taking me. Let things fall apart. Just let the space clear somewhat. See what might emerge beyond what I knew in that messy moment, beyond what I could know in that moment. And when I got my job at Pizza Hut and was handed a blank name tag, it did not feel right for me to put my regular name on it in this time of falling apart. And maybe the source of the hesitancy was exactly the part of me that refused to return to statistics class and wanted the experience of failure. The part of me that wanted things to fall apart. Can that even be so? That a part of ourselves might know that this is the right time to fall apart, even as other parts are working 24/7 to maintain the illusion of perfection, but they're working so hard that they do not see that the big picture of what is happening is not sustainable and it ought to be blown apart. It ought to be blown apart. I called him Snake, which I have come to know as a symbol of wisdom and healing. But I didn't know that back then, 32 years ago. It was just because the name felt vaguely dangerous and it just cracked me up and was weird. It was just weird. It was anti-Mr. IQ Booster Club. And all Snake wanted me to do for the remaining months of my failed semester was cook in the kitchen. I would pour flour into the big mixing machines and make the pizza dough. I'd spin fat rounds of dough in the air, toss them, catch them when they fell. I would place them into pans, ready to be and smush them into the pan, into the roundness of the pan. I would put the sauce on it and smear it, and then I'd cover that pizza with whatever the customer wanted. I'd slide those prepared pizzas into the oven. I would retrieve them when they were baked and beautiful. I would crunch down on them with the cutter to make the slices. I would slide them into boxes. I would send them on their way to be eaten. That is all Snake wanted me to do, and that is all I did over and over and over again for 5 months. My life went quiet. The perfectionism went to sleep. And then it was time to sign up again for a new semester. I signed on as a philosophy major. The grades of A that I got from every one of my classes from then till I graduated seemed effortless and really beside the point. I went on, I got my graduate degree, I taught philosophy for almost 10 years, I shifted things up, I went to seminary, I became what you see before you now. I am convinced that failure makes for success. I am convinced that there are times that snake must take over, and a deep darkness takes over our lives, and the parts that are like machines running nonstop start to smoke. They seize up as if they had been starved of the necessary oil to keep them running. There is smoke, there may be fire, then there is stillness, and it has all fallen apart, and it is a mess. And what do we do now? Well, maybe we just make pizza very calmly, until the next thing emerges. And then we soar. Amen.